Okay. So we got to continue. All right. So my name is Nikos Apostolopoulos. I'm a recovery regeneration specialist who focused on developing a technique called microstretching, which I developed back in 1995 in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I've worked with a lot of sports teams as well as individual athletes. And like Richie said, we connected about 10 years ago, and Richie and I have basically worked with regards to trying to bring this to the NACAC TFCA. And as Richie alluded to, my big project right now, my big pet project, is to develop a recovery regeneration center in Albergue Olympico in Puerto Rico. So there's some funding that has been put aside by the Pan American Association. So hopefully we'll all visit there sometime and continue on this path on proper recovery regeneration. Just to say, in sports, we've done a lot on nutrition, we've done a lot on hydration, a lot of strength and conditioning, a lot on, endurance, sprinting. But the one field that we've really haven't really touched upon a lot is recovery regeneration. It is the biggest untapped field left in sports right now, and it's one of the most difficult ones because it's not just a science, it's an art form. How do you basically help the athlete recover, get the proper amount of sleep to be able to perform at their maximum level? Is something that the late Andy Higgins, who is a really good friend of mine, often said that it is the art form of training itself. So as I said last week, we are just going to review quickly because I want to get into some questions and answers. I actually do have my pillows and stuff behind me. So if anybody has an issue with regards to how do I best stretch a hamstring that's been injured, or a grade 1 or grade 2 tear, what's the best approach, the amount of stretches that lead up to actually stretching the hamstring. It's very important. It's not just about focusing on the hamstring, and we're going to get to that later on in this discussion. I've only got about 12 slides, so and like Richie said after the last talk, I said to him, why don't we just do a live chat where people can bring questions, and we're going to be each other's, teachers and students. So as I said earlier, this pie chart just basically looks at a recovery regeneration, but it's a system. It's not just about concepts, it's how you put the network in the body to help the body get ready for performance. We touched upon the concept of pain. Pain is something that is very important, especially if you're actually trying to help the athlete recover from their training or competition. The last thing you want to do is actually get an athlete to stretch to the point of pain and discomfort, because it does cause tissue damage. And the one thing that we know for sure, that pain does cause inflammation. And inflammation is the body's way of saying there's something wrong here. And it's also the body's way of trying to adapt to what has happened to it through training, through competition. Even mental emotional trauma actually is an inflammatory response, which was shown by a research team in Ireland that looked at those pro-inflammatory proteins that we talked about last time, that mental emotional trauma does release those pro-inflammatory proteins. So if you've got an athlete who's in pain and he's got mental emotional issues as well, it just compounds the problem. And the big problem that we have with athletes is sleep deprivation. And how do we get them ready to sleep properly? Because that is the tool of proper recovery regeneration, sleep. So we touched upon this quickly. We said the person lying down on his back, that's the parasympathetic nervous system. That's the system of healing. That's what we try to stimulate with proper recovery regeneration. So the guy being chased by the snake, he's the sympathetic nervous system, fight, flight, or fright, getting him ready for activity. Well, this is the one thing you don't want to do when you're trying to help an athlete recover and regenerate, is cause any stimulus in his body, because that's actually, so by stimulus, I'm talking about pain, discomfort. That's priming its body to remove itself from that stimulus, and it's counterproductive. So we have to focus on the parasympathetic. Now, quickly in a nutshell, this is how the body responds to its environment. So what you see in the diagrams, so I know there's that big muscle on the bottom, just above that muscle where there's a red arrow going to it, that's your muscle spindles. That's been designed to actually stretch, to send stretching. So it prevents you from overstretching, okay? Now, the thing over to the far right is the tendon, and that's the Goldie tendon organ. Now, these things are your proprioceptive tissues. This is what you're working with when you're focusing on stretching, proper stretching and recovery regeneration. So these tissues are what allow us to adapt to any physical perturbation or any physical training. At the same time, they're the ones that will get stimulated in order to protect us. So to the far left, the Sarcomere Genesis is just basically the idea that when you're actually causing any stress or strain on the muscle itself, you're affecting the muscle cell, which is the sarcomere. Now, there's a school of thought that says that proper stretching actually may increase the amount of sarcomeres. There's another school that says that basically it's a tolerance thing. This is the biggest question that we're trying to solve in the realm of with stretching. But from a recovery regeneration point of view, it's very, very important that you got to realize you got to work within the parameters of the proprioceptive tissues, the muscle spindles and the Goldie tendon organ. Now, this is force. Everything that on our bodies, these are the forces that we actually generate on our body, and these are the forces that we're trying to dissipate or actually help the tissues be able to adapt. So most athletes are exposed to a lot of compression force, you know, landing, hopping, and bounding, it's compressive force. Tension is another thing, and shearing. Those top three are the ones that most athletes are exposed to. Now, rotation is another one. I mean, in the throws, they'll rotate, and then obviously bending. So these are all the forces that affect the body, and these are the ones that are affecting our connective tissue. However, all these are basically affected by gravity. So anything we do to our body, we also have to deal with gravity as well. So if you actually have a body that's been injured and it's compensating, gravity is an amazing, amazing force. I mean, I don't know how many of you have seen people that have walked down the street, and then you look at their bodies, it's morphed, it's deformed actually, but they're still moving. But part of that issue is not only the fact that they've had injuries in the past and their body's been exposed to all those forces, but it's also gravity working on them. So these are the things that we have to keep in mind when we're trying to help the body decompress. And stretching, like Andy used to say, activity is about doing, stretching is about allowing. I mean, it's hard to believe he's been gone now for about a year. Anyways, onwards and forwards. So this is it. So we're allowing our bodies to go back to some form of homeostasis. Now, this is what happens at the cellular level as well. So everything that our bodies are exposed to from the external will affect the internal, and your body's response is it actually will take that mechanical stimulus and provide a biochemical response, part of it being inflammation and how inflammation is affecting its homeostasis because the cell responds to its immediate environment. Now, the other thing that's very, very important, and we touched upon this briefly last time, is that you have to look at the body from all the planes that of how it's going to be affected. So, you know, there's the transverse or the middle plane, the sagittal, which is divides our body left and right, and then the frontal, which is forwards and backwards. But what's very, very important is how, when you actually have a compensatory shift, all these things have to be taken into consideration if you're wanting to help the athlete recover and regenerate properly. Okay, so the other thing that which is very, very important, is this whole thing called joint centration. Now, when the diagram on your left, this is basically telling us that the joint is properly centered, which basically is telling us that the muscles themselves are in a balanced state, and actually when the athlete attains a balance in the joints, that means he can maximize his or her performance. However, with compensatory shifts and with injuries, we get more or less this thing happening, which is to your right, which the joint itself is not centered anymore. So this is so what's happening in this case is there's a lot of undue forces that are affecting the joint in manners where if this isn't addressed properly, the athlete will maximize their performance. But more importantly, when the athlete stops their training at some point, there's going to be this unbalance of muscle tension, which is going to affect how they're going to just walk. You know, I actually have I have no cartilage in my left ankle. That's because of javelin and years of abuse. But I have noticed that because of that missing of cartilage in my left ankle, my whole left side has basically got a lot of tension in there, and I stretch nightly to try to be able to move pain-free. Okay. Now, this to me is the most important thing in the body. Besides the joint centration, I call these two structures here the clutch system of the body. Now, the diagram to your left, everybody should know, is your hip flexors. So the big muscle that's coming off the spine, that's your psoas major. And on the inside, on the pelvis, that's your iliacus. And what they do is they meet by just past the pubic bone, and they twist their fibers and they connect high up with the femur. This is the one that causes a lot of issues with lower back problems. And this is, I don't know how many people have seen athletes that are hyperlordotic. It's because the hip flexors are very, very tight. Now, to prevent that and try to help that athlete with that hyperlordosis is you work on the abdominals. But what I find very interesting is the diagram to your right. And this is the thoracolumbar fascia. And this is the thing that I find the most interesting thing. These two diamond-shaped structures are actually going to interpret what's happening with the hip flexors. So interestingly enough, so if your hip flexors are very, very tight, they're going to pull the spine forward. This thoracolumbar fascia, so this is down here's the thoracolumbar fascia, and this is the trapezius area. These two diamond shapes work in unison. So for instance, if I have an issue on my right side and the hip flexors gotten involved, now anytime you have an issue where the injury is become chronic, you can bet your bottom dollar the hip flexors are involved. And then the joint, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but there's a little where the tailbone is. If you look, so I'm looking to the left diagram, far left, there's a line underneath the psoas major muscle. That's your SI joint. Once the SI joint becomes compromised because of chronic pain, the athlete will never maximize their performance because they have a lot of imbalance in their bodies, and part of that imbalance is through joint centration or decentration. Okay, so what I was getting at is if you actually have a right hip issue or a right leg issue, it often transfers into a left shoulder problem through the thoracolumbar fascia and the hip flexors. And the hip flexors are some of the most trained muscle groups in sports. They are involved with the athlete's stance, the push-off, because you lower your center of gravity. These muscles are always active, and they actually work every time when you go up and down stairs and even sitting in a chair. A lot of people have low back problems from sitting in a chair is because the hip flexors are being put in a shortened position and they're tight. And then when you get up to get off your chair, they basically are tight and you have that pain in your lower back. Okay, so now what you're seeing here in a nutshell is, as I touched upon last time, if you look at between the pelvis and the knee, there are 26 muscles. So when you're looking at an athlete who's had, let's say, a grade 1 tear in their hamstring, and let's call it the semimembranosus. Remember, the hamstrings There's 3 muscle groups to it: biceps femoris, which is on the outside, semimembranosus, tendinosus, they're on the inside. So we've injured our semimembranosus. Remember what I said last time, I don't care about the semimembranosus, and I'm not going to focus on trying to help that muscle heal. What I'm going to focus on is how that one hamstring muscle has affected the other 25. And this is just on the right side. So the right side. So in essence, from the pelvis to the knee, if we look at both sides, we've got 52 muscles, and they have to work in synergy. So if we've got one hamstring that's injured, that means 51 other muscles are changing their patterns to accommodate for that one injury. So it makes sense to be able to focus on the other muscles that have changed their patterns for regards to protection. And unless you focus on looking at how they have changed their patterns, you're going to have muscle imbalances and tensions in the system that need to be rectified. Now, basically in a nutshell, so if the person has a left, so in this diagram here, a pelvis, so the person has an injury on their left side, which would be on our right side, what are you going to do automatically is you're going to compensate to the right side, compensatory shifts. So now think about it. You've got an athlete that has an injury, not even an athlete, anybody that's had an injury, they're compensating, they're protecting, they're putting more pressure on, this case, on their right hip, which is your left, on your left side. That joint is going to start to disintegrate. Tell you right now, a lot of these injuries where people have had hip replacements later on in life, part of it is because of a previous injury that hasn't been looked at, and all these joint centrations that we're talking about, all these muscle imbalances get to the point where the joint is so worn down in there that they actually have to have a hip replacement. Okay, so now, so we're talking about stretching and the microstretching, whole idea of how to basically alleviate muscle tension and all this. So and this is a review for those that were last time. So I said, like any form of training, you have to look at intensity, duration, and frequency. So in microstretching, as you guys were privy to the talk 2 weeks ago, we said that in stretching intensity has to be a 3 or 4 out of 10. It has to be very, very gentle. You can't actually cause pain while you're stretching. Remember, this is about recovery and regeneration. This is about helping the tissue be able to alleviate any tension in it to get it ready for maximum performance. So 3 or 4 out of 10, it feels like you're putting a hand in lukewarm water. The other thing is duration, 60 seconds. It takes about 30 seconds to move from the middle of the muscle belly out towards the myotendon junction. It's the myotendon junction where the muscle and tendon meet, where 90% of all injuries happen. And that's where we have to focus on when we actually are trying to alleviate tension in the system. That junction is very, very important. And then we said frequency. Frequency is a habit-forming thing. So if you have an injury that has caused you to compensate a certain way and you focus and it's basically there all the time, it forms a habit. In order to break a habit, you've got to create another habit, a new habit. So with microstretching, you actually stretch before you go to bed. I can give you guys an idea. I'll show you guys what I do. I actually have a QL problem on my left side, and what I do is I actually stretch before I go to bed. But there are certain stretches that I have put together. They're very, very important. Sequencing of the stretching is very, very important in order for you to rectify any issues with regards to muscle pain and tension. The other thing that we touched upon was stability, balance, and control. So what do I mean by that? You have to place the body in a manner where you're eliminating as much muscle contraction as possible, okay? So when we get into the discussions, I'll show you guys how my setup is here. And then actually, why don't I just show you guys right now? So let me see if I can do this, Richie. Oops, easy. You guys see that?
Yep.
Okay. So what do I mean by stability, balance, and control? If I want to stretch my glutes, what I do is this is my mat, and so I will place my body in a manner. Tell me if you don't see this, Rich.
Well, we'll see when you get down.
Okay. So, can you see this?
Yep.
Okay.
Head's on a
Now,
pole.
what I've done is I've put pillows underneath my head. Now, as you can see, my feet are supported up against the wall. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to cross my leg over. So my body is supported in a lot of manners. And now the focus is on my right glute. Now, if I wanted to do an IT band stretch, the same thing is I actually have a supportive pillow. And then what I do is I will place my left knee on top in front of my right knee, and all I'll do is I will just gently lower my body. Now it's supported.
Because do the other side. Do it on the other side so we can see.
Okay.
That side's kind of out of the. There we go. The
Okay.
tables.
So again, I have crossed my left leg over my right knee, and all I'm doing is just lowering my body, picking up a gentle stretch through here. This also doubles up as a QL stretch, which is really good. And all I'm doing is just lying there. If I didn't have my pillow here, a number of things would happen. One is obviously I'd fall over, but then it's going to not stretch the IT band properly and the QL. But more importantly, it's going to put a lot of stress in my system because now my legs are contracting to keep me in that position. As soon as my body senses support, it relaxes. As soon as it relaxes, the neural system relaxes as well, which is very, very important. So you have to provide a lot of, support to the body in order to help it properly recover and regenerate.
Hey, and Nikos, it was hard at the table there, but you had that pillow under your neck for the reason of flattening out your
lumbar area.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
Very, very important. I mean, my room isn't the biggest room. My mother's house, I'm staying with my mom. It's a museum. But as we progress with these sessions that Richie and I have put together and other questions, we will do our best to sort of show you what to do, how to do it in order to answer any of your questions. So the whole idea is about eliminating any muscle contraction to relax the body, to relax the muscles, but more importantly, to relax the neural system. When I do my stretching, and when I stretch my own patient,
just look at your video yourself because all we see is your hand and elbow.
Oh.
There you go.
There you go. Sorry about that, guys. I mean, to tell you the truth, this is the first time I've done something like this besides what we did 2 weeks ago. And I thought to myself, let's just go with this. Let's just play. Let's just create a scenario where you guys can bring your questions and then we just have a chat. Anyhow, so eliminate muscle contraction. The other thing was sequencing of stretches. It's very, very important. So for instance, with my left QL, I will actually start stretching my hip flexor first, and then I will stretch my glute, and then my IT band, and then I will go back into my hip flexor. These are the sequences that actually allow me to target the QL itself, okay? And then the whole idea is the kinetic, focusing on the origin and insertion of the muscle groups and how they work in synergy. This is me, and let's open it up for questions.
All right, so let's do this. Anybody's got, why don't you end your screen share? Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
So just, what you were talking about joint centration, Nikos.
Yeah.
I've actually found that the biggest problem for that is environment, sport, or programming. So it's either lifestyle or people are writing programs that are totally imbalanced, or there's not enough variety of sport, kids that are over specializing early, in like one sport because they think you have to do that to become a pro or something. And that's, for me, that's causing like probably causing the joint centration issues with things in the hip and shoulder. And I've been dealing with that another way. And I've only been using microstretching for like the recovery stuff. How are you using it for joint centration? How are you trying to fix joint centration issues with it?
Well, again, Tom and I go back several years as well. Tom now lives in Berlin. He was living in Hong Kong when he first connected with me and has been using microstretching for a while. So Tom, the way I actually deal with joint centration is to look at the muscle groups around the joint itself. So the thing is, you can see how a person walks and their gait, and you'll pick up an idea of how tight they are anterior or posterior to the joint itself. And then what I'll do is I'll put the stretches together to eliminate the tension at the joint itself. But again, the most important thing with regards to, I know you said the shoulders. Well, here's the problem with the shoulders. I worked a lot with wheelchair basketball. I was the head therapist for about 3 or 4 years with the Canadian women's wheelchair basketball team. And the one thing that you notice with wheelchair is because they're ambulating as well, they end up with something like this. So as you can see, the pec major and minor are very, very tight. It causes an anterior rotation of the shoulders this way. But the other thing that's very, very important, if you look at your athletes, if they have muscle imbalances in their shoulder joint, is they have this happening here with the neck.
Hey, Nikos.
Okay?
Nikos,
Yo.
we do this. Click the stop share on your screen, and then
stop share on my screen.
Yeah, then they can get you
Got
big.
it.
And hey, everybody watching, if you haven't done this, if you go on the video of him, there's 3 little dots on the blue thing, and you can say pin video, and it'll make Nikos, it'll make him big. Well, there's a way to do it. There's a little one single button.
Okay. I'm big already, man. You don't have to make me any bigger. Anyhow, so Tom, getting back to your thing. So with the wheelchair athletes, what we noticed was that when the shoulders roll forward, you will always, always, always see this. You will see the neck muscle shorten up this way. This is how the body responds. You will never see this, where the shoulders are forward and the neck is back, okay? So when we looked at the shoulders, the one thing that we focused on was we didn't want to do any more strength work here. They were very strong. Some of these athletes, like Jennifer Krempian, she may have weighed about 100 and some odd pounds wet, but she was benching like 2 1/4. So we didn't want to even focus on that. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to take the weakness part of the rhomboids here are weak. So the stretch that I designed for them, which has helped them out a lot, is I actually took a towel and I got them to roll it up, and then they put it on their bed or a hard surface. And then what I did, so this is the towel itself. So literally, so I'm on the ground right now. I placed my spine right up on top of the towel, like this, Tom. And then what the towel does is it pushes my spine up, which actually pulls or pushes my chest backwards, okay? So that was stretch 1 to help with regards to what's happening with the shoulder area, okay? So now I'm using gravity. So I'm on the ground, and all I'm doing is lying there. Now you got to make sure you've got pillows underneath your knees, because if your legs are extended while you're on this towel, it puts a lot of pressure in the lumbar area because your pelvis is anteriorly rotated. Pillows underneath the knees and a slight ankle or a pillow underneath your head, and you're just lying there. So now you're using gravity. That's stretch 1. Stretch 2, then, I had to basically focus on the neck because the neck's involved. So the best stretches that I showed for them was to literally table. Now, do not, and I mean this, do not do a neck stretch like this. Or, grabbing on the side of your chair and pulling over like this. First and foremost, here's something you guys got to realize. The head weighs anywhere between 8 to 12 pounds. So if I am dropping my head forward like this, is this a stretch? No. What it is my muscles are contracting to prevent my head from falling forward. So now they're tight. I'm picking up tension. But we think that's a stretch. That's not a stretch. That's a tug of war match between your head from falling forward and your neck muscles from contracting to prevent it from falling it further forward. I know the spine, you're attached to the spine, otherwise, you know, your head would fall to the ground. Now, if I'm grabbing on the side of the chair and I'm pulling over this way, I'm putting a lot of stress in my system, you know, and again, that stress in the system, if it's causing pain and discomfort, is counterproductive. So what you want to do, and what we did with these athletes, is we got a table, and all they did was they placed their elbows on top of the table like this, okay? As soon as they actually, so then we got them to, and you guys can try this as I'm talking, but as soon as you actually tuck your chin in, then you support your head. As soon as I support my head, now this becomes a proper stretch, okay? So I hold this for a minute. I come back to the neutral position. I rotate to the one side. So the chances are, if a person's got some neck shoulder issues, the one side that they're rotating, so if I'm rotating to my right side and I'm picking up a lot of tension and pain there, then that's not the side I'm going to go to first. I'm going to go to the other side. So I'm going to rotate to the left side. I'm going to tuck my chin in. I'm going to support my forehead, support the side of my head like this, and then I hold this stretch for another minute. The thing that you guys have to also keep in mind is, look at my shoulders. They're not like this. They're open. My chest is open. So when you're doing these stretches, you got to make sure that the chest is open. So then I hold the stretch here for a minute, back to the neutral position, turn to the right, support the head, support the forehead, support the side of the head, and then I hold that stretch for a minute. So what these stretches did, and obviously the one thing that you got to realize, you're not just going to focus on stretching alone when you're trying to help give back balance to the shoulder area or the shoulder joint. You also have to focus on strengthening the rhomboids, which are very, very important, because with a person who's got a lot of rotation forward this way, the scapulas are flared open, so the shoulders are flared open. So that's what I would do, Tom, with the shoulders. And for joint centration, I will see where these muscle imbalances are. I'll use stretching. And once I'm able to increase ranges of motion, then I'll actually focus on strengthening at the same time. Hope that answers your question.
Hey, Nikos, here's one that came in on the chat. What's the best way to release the iliopsoas? You mentioned hyperlordosis, and I have several athletes that struggle with their mechanics because of that.
Now, as I said earlier on, you just don't focus on the iliopsoas muscle, because part of the issue that gets involved with the iliopsoas is the IT band. People that have iliopsoas issues have very, very tight IT bands. Again, these are stretches that are put together. I think one thing we have to do, Richie, for next time, and this is a very, very important, and I put this out there, is if you guys can come or send Richie questions ahead of time, because there's a 13 core, 14 core stretches that I put together, and then I could say, okay, stretch 1, 2, 4, these are the sequences you've done. But let's answer this question now too. So the thing is, if I've got an iliopsoas issue that's causing a lot of problems with my lumbar area, I have to release my IT band. I also have to release my glute. So let me go back to this. Can you guys see this, the floor now?
Yeah, move the chair.
Okay, I moved the chair.
And you might have to tilt it down a little more.
Okay. Let me pull this. Is that better?
You tilt down a little more and put it more on the edge of the table without falling.
Let me do this now.
Or put
I love this, man. This is fun. We're improvising now.
Move the computer more to the left and put the edge of the computer flush with the edge of the table, and then tilt your screen down.
This way?
Tilt your screen down.
There.
More.
Okay.
And if you put the edge of your computer flush with the edge of the table, then you'll be able to see the whole thing, I think.
I'm trying.
Keep turning it, no, the other direction. There you go.
But if I do this, then I'm actually not, I can see what you're saying. Anyways.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Try that.
Look, so I'm going to demonstrate. So the first stretch in the sequence is going to be the glute piriformis, which is the one that I showed you guys earlier. So pillow.
Pillow for the head, neck.
Can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay. It's the crossing the leg over. Things to keep in mind when you're doing this stretch is make sure that this is not happening. So make sure that the glute and the hip and the pelvis are down on the ground, solid on the ground. Cross your leg over. Make sure that your ankle is past the knee joint. Okay. You hold that stretch for a minute. Cross over. Hold that stretch for a minute. Okay. And then repeat it 2 more times. That's the first stretch. The second stretch is for the IT band piriformis. Now, the piriformis is a muscle that's responsible for sciatica. So,
and Nikos, while you're up, try one more thing.
Yeah.
Slide your computer, keep it facing where it is, slide it a little farther away from you, and maybe tilt the screen down a little more.
How's that?
A little farther.
Better?
Now tilt the screen. Yeah, that'll probably be better.
Okay.
Yep.
So the next stretch in the sequence, let's see.
We need to get your mom filming with the camera next time.
Got to get my mom up here. The 3rd floor. Anyways, so the next stretch in the sequence would be, where's my red peanut? Okay. Peanut. Lying down, crossing the leg over. Now, here's a really good clue for coaches. If you have an athlete and they can't do this easily, how many of us have athletes that have tried to do a stretch like this? And what you notice is that they have to really, really reach to try to bring their leg over this way. This is a good indication of how open an athlete really is. So it means that the SI joint is actually quite relaxed at the same time. Now, one issue that happens, this is why you need to do this stretch before hip flexors, because if you pull your leg over, sometimes you're going to pick up a hip flexor sensation in there. So this is an indication of how connected the IT band is and the piriformis to the psoas major. So what you do then, you put a pillow underneath like this, you cross your leg over. Now this is even easier. Now that I've raised my whole system towards myself, I can just gently place my hand on my knee and pull over gently. Don't do this. What you're trying to do is you're trying to keep the hip pelvis down on the ground at the same time. And all you're doing is gently pulling over, picking up an IT band piriformis stretch. Those who suffer from sciatica, this is one of the best stretches. And then
your left foot is supported on the pillow or the peanut.
Yeah, I'll show you right now because I'm going to do this.
Yep,
you see, it's supported. Always support, always support. And then you just pull over like that. Okay, so glute stretch here, IT band piriformis stretch, and then the last stretch is for the psoas major. And all it involves is, again, chair.
So move it
very,
farther
very
away.
Important. Huh?
There you go. Yeah, move it back farther so we have some room to see you.
Okay. No, you can't.
No,
there.
Like move your body back toward where you were.
I'm going to do this right now. So I'm using a chair.
There you go.
Okay. Now, a lot of us have done the psoas stretch like this. Okay, you guys can see the psoas stretch. So basically, let me reverse it. This one here.
Nikos, put the chair over by the wall where you started with the first glute stretch. Then we'll be able to see it better because you're too close to the camera there.
I need the chair to show you guys something.
I know, put the chair by the wall and face
Okay.
the other way and do it. Turn the camera towards you there.
Okay, let's do this.
So turn the camera.
I'm going to use my bread. I'm going to
Okay.
use my bed.
You're
I'm gonna
still,
use my bed.
you're still too close to us is what I'm saying. Yeah, the camera's too close. Yeah.
How's that?
Yeah, move really close to the bed now.
Okay.
There you go. That's better.
I probably will have to raise the camera too. Or why don't I just buy a camera? So, the idea is when you're doing the psoas stretch, you need to support your body. So in this case, I will use the chair, and I'll show you why I'm going to use the chair. Because the side that is being stretched is the side that needs to be supported, okay? So all you want to do is just lower yourself. Don't do what a lot of people do, which is basically try to overarch their back to try to get the stretch. No, just lower yourself gently, making sure that in this case, the right knee is at 90 degrees. And ideally, if you have a chair on either side, it's the best thing. And all you do is basically just you're in this position for 60 seconds, okay? And then switch sides, same idea, but you're supported. Don't use a Swiss ball or don't use anything that's got some movement in it because you're gonna start contracting in order to support you in that position. But if you've got something solid and stable, this is gonna help with the psoas, to stretch the psoas itself. So those three stretches are very, very important just to target the psoas. All right? We might have to get one of those cameras. What do you think, Jimson?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
He needs a camera crew.
Needs a camera, yeah.
He needs a
Yeah,
camera crew.
We'll get you another
Jimson,
camera.
Jimson's the guru of this stuff.
Let
You
me
know
go
about
here
cameras
to,
and all this.
We'll
Any
get you
other
another
questions?
camera.
Huh?
Let me go here to other questions. Here
Yeah.
was more about the effects of the SI joint, especially in older athletes. What can be done if it's quotation marks fused? I guess locked is what they mean. Now you've talked some about that already.
So the question is, again, the SI joint is fused. Okay, the issue then again, what happens is that the psoas major muscle and the iliac, so the hip flexors, they're involved with that sort of conundrum of making you feel that the SI joint is fused. So again, the focus would be, how do I get into that hip flexor? The issue then becomes putting, again, this is where it gets this is where I'm a therapist as well. So if you were to come to me, I would actually do something else and then give you the sequence of stretches that I've given you right now. But since we're on Zoom, the question then is, focus on these three stretches that I've given you. And then if you can get back to us next time and see if you've alleviated the issue or not. But again, the fused SI joint is a hip flexor issue involved as well with the piriformis. Now, this person who's got this fused SI joint, do they actually have any neural issues involved with that?
It's actually me, Nico Jimson. So
Oh.
I remember back in '97 when you treated me back in Vancouver, and I remember my hips were pretty flexible. You know, you can actually feel that rotation. And even now, well, back then, I would do what they call the Asian squat. People know what that is? You squat down and just do your thing. And back then, back at McGill, back in the '90s, you could hear it sort of crack when I do the squat. You can sort of hear it click, click, click. You can see it movement. Here it is, 20 odd years later, and I do that Asian squat, and nothing's moving. So it's really, yeah, it's just.
But you see, Jimson also has had he just had a grade 1, grade 2 hamstring. So you got to realize the one thing too, the balance of the SI joint is actually what's happening between the hamstrings and the hip flexors at the same time. So just to give you an idea, and we reiterated this last time, is that a very tight left hip flexor often involves a very, very tight right hamstring. So when you've had hamstring issues in themselves, the hamstring's been weakened, and the problem then becomes that there's this muscle imbalance between the hip flexor and the hamstring that needs to be addressed in order to be able to remove the tightness out of the SI joint.
Yeah, I'm a
And
firm
the
believer.
IT band. The IT band
Yeah.
is key. The IT band is key.
But I'm a firm believer that for sprinters, the engine is in the hips, the glutes, upper hamstrings. That's where all the power hips.
Every
and-
athlete,
Yeah, every speed and power athlete, definitely.
Every-
and strength athlete.
every distance.
And that's when I went, remember those diagrams that I had showed you guys earlier on about the hip flexors and the thoracolumbar fascia? That's the clutch system of the body. What happens in that area right here, you know, will determine, and you gotta also realize another thing, is if I have had an injury, like for instance, my left ankle, what my body is going to do, and this is what the body does automatically, is it's trying to protect, it's trying to how do you say, take stress off that issue. So we're going to use me as an example right now. So I've actually had no cartilage in my left ankle, like I said earlier on. So what my body does is it automatically puts more pressure on my right side. Interestingly enough, one thing that happens is that the hip flexors get involved from a protection point of view, and what they do is they actually anteriorly rotate the hip pelvis this way, because what it's trying to do is it's trying to move the limb off the ground. Interestingly enough, if you guys go to bed tonight, just lie there and relax as much as possible and see which one of your legs have more of an external rotation than the other one. The one that's hugely externally rotated, so basically in this case, let's say it's the right side, this side's got an issue. The hip flexor is involved on that side for protection, okay? So the hip flexor gets involved to try to move the leg off the ground to protect it, okay? So it's very, very important. So the hip flexor is dominant, and then right through the thoracolumbar fascia. When the hip flexor gets involved, the tendency is for it to pull the spine forward this way, causing the lordosis. When that happens, this whole area here is put into a somewhat a tense position, which sometimes can trigger off these nice little trigger points in the lumbar area. You know? So the last joint to get compromised, if any injury, is the SI joint. And sometimes the L5-S1. There's none of this movement in there. And again, guys, it's the hip flexors. Very, very important. How are we doing for time?
Doing fine. It's 7 till 4, so it went a little longer than you wanted the first time. Anybody else have any other questions? You can just unmute and ask one if you want.
Yeah, I've got one. Mentioned earlier you do some stretching before you go to bed. Don't you stretch muscles when they're warm?
No.
Maybe cold when you're stretching?
Good question. Never. I never stretch my muscle. I never warm up my muscles to stretch. The idea is, and I've often said this a long time ago, a true state of a muscle is its cold state. It's going to tell you how far you're really going to go. So by me warming up the muscle itself, I am actually negating that neural impulse or that neural sensation that's going to tell me you can only go so far. So I might bypass that and may cause an overstretch. A lot of my patients that come to me, Peter, they don't do a warm-up stretch at all. And I'm stretching them off the bat, because then I know how far I can really go with how much tension there is in the system.
Okay.
I think the other couple of things you talked about last time. Mostly one, they're very gentle, and two, the purpose isn't range of motion. You're not working on range of motion. You're working on relaxing and healing the muscle. So in that sense, there's not a threat to the muscle by doing these when they're cold, as opposed to the traditional view of trying to overstretch something to work on its, you know, its mobility or its range of motion. Obviously, then if you did that cold, that would be a problem.
And the other thing too is the body's supported at the same time.
Right.
Which is very, very important. Support, 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 because that way you're going to relax the neural system.
Here's another one that came in. I think this refers to something you said last time. The question is, what problem do you have with yoga stretches or types of yoga?
Again, yoga okay, this is me. Yoga is not about stretch. It's strength and stretch at the same time. So I'm not a yoga person, but I think somebody else can correct me, but I think this is the warrior. I'm not sure. Where you basically, I'm gonna have to remove my desk. Is this the warrior stretch where people get in this position and they're doing this? Now, they're saying that this is actually stretching my hip flexor at the same time. I'm saying it's not, because now my hip flexor is getting involved from a postural point of view. So it's strengthening it. Now, if I were to give it some support, like so, I'm taking a little stress off it, you know, but it's still contracted. So the idea with yoga is poses themselves tend to put the muscle in a contracted state, which I don't define as a stretch.
In terms of strengthening stability, they may be perfectly valid to do it, and when you're doing them.
Oh, for sure. I'm not saying yoga is wrong.
Yeah.
But from a point of view where we're trying to actually help take tension out of the system and help the muscles recover and regenerate properly and remove as much tension as possible, support is the way to go.
So here's a last couple, and I got to apologize to everybody because I've got to get going. And one thing you might do is you yourself cut and paste while I'm asking this one into the chat. Nikos, you can do this, your email there. And then, you know, people could ask you during the week, okay, what order would you do for this kind of tightness, this and that? And then we can work more on questions ahead of time for next time.
I think working questions ahead of time would be great as well, because then I could take the stretches that I have the diagrams for and say, hey, Jimson, this is the question you asked, boom, 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 or Carmen, this is what you're after, you know. Okay, we're almost done, Mrs. Mercado.
So yeah, he knows. Okay, so what stretches do you do at night before you go to bed? I assume maybe you do all of them, or you do the
no. Okay, now, oh, damn it. Remember, I have my ankle problem, and I actually have my left QL trigger point right here. So this is what I do. Okay. My very, very, very first stretch for me is take this little implement here and literally I will just sit on it like this. This is actually a really nice stretch for my quads, but at the same time, it's stretching my shin because my foot is backwards this way. I will lie there for about a minute, and then I actually then go into my psoas stretch. So in this case, for demonstration purposes, I'll go stretch my right psoas, hold that for a minute, back into this for a minute, go to my left psoas, hold that for a minute, and then I will go into my glute piriformis stretch, and followed by the last stretch for me for my trigger point is using this thing where I basically tuck it into my body like this and just roll my body over this pillow to effectively stretch my lumbar area. That's my sequence that I go before I go to sleep.
And there's still, it's kind of hard to see some of them, but here's my suggestion. There's another question about what kind of pillows and things, but why don't, if everybody can look on the chat, I put that right at the very beginning of the chat, so maybe cut and paste it off the link to the drive, and I'll put it here at the end of the chat too. And on the drive, there's an article with all of the won't let me cut and paste, but there's a drive file with the article with all of the diagrams. Here, it did it now.
But it's the lower, Richie, those ones are the lower diagrams, lower body diagrams.
Right. So, and then maybe we can get the other ones up there for next week and figure out a way there. I'm just afraid they're not being able to see all of you on this because of the camera position and the computer. But
well, what I'll do is I'll actually look at getting a, I don't know, like a Microsoft whatever camera that I could hook to the computer, and then I can put it like a webcam. I think that's what we need.
Yeah, that may work better. And then you and I can set up ahead of time of where it goes and good view of all of them.
Sure. I mean, if I could set up from there and it focuses this way, but the whole idea about this every Wednesday at 4 o'clock, I mean, I thought 45 minutes was going to be a lot, but obviously we've gone over time, which is great, is just bring your questions and let's just see if we can solve some issues that you're having or your athletes are having. Now, the other thing too is also, if you want to email me ahead of time, because it's not just about stretching, guys, it's also nutrition, which is very, very important. I might do some research and say, somebody asked me this question. I know that my forte is stretching and from a recovery regeneration point of view, but also, you know, nutrition is a very, very important thing that I might be able to answer a question by the research that I do. So it's almost like we're just creating like a chat here of a fun little chat where we just get together on a Wednesday for an hour and shoot the thing.
All right, well, good. And I just put your email up there, microstretching@gmail.com. So pretty easy.
Correct.
Cut and paste
Correct.
that or take a picture. That way you could email him directly with a question or something to show for next week, or, you know, question about, you know, the kind of pillows, things like that.
Well, from pillows, from a point of view, pillows, just use any ordinary, like if you can't get these physio rolls that I use, and like the other thing that I got to press upon you is I'm also a therapist, so I actually use these to help my patients stretch. But pillows, somewhat hard pillows. Oops. Let me get this in there. Even pillows like this that are bolsters, anything that basically allows you to support your body. Like I could have done the same stretch by tucking the pillow into my tummy like this, you know, and then rolling over my pillow. And now here's a clue. When I'm doing, and by all means, those who are golfers, this is a really good stretch for golfers. Just tuck the pillow underneath your tummy and then roll forward, hold that for a minute, rotate to one side, roll forward again. Now it's going to hit my left QL side and my left. Tom, you asked me about a latissimus dorsi stretch. This is the stretch. When you rotate, Tom Walsh, so when you rotate to this side and come forward, you're going to hit the lat dorsi as well. Okay? And then hold that for a minute and then rotate to the other side. And you'll notice when you work with your clients or your athletes, these simple stretches here will also tell you how tight they are from one side to the other. So they may have a lot of range of motion this way and no tension, and then they go here and they're stuck. Well, automatically, that's an imbalance that you have to address. That's gonna, you don't address these imbalances, you're gonna affect the joint centration, but you're not gonna maximize performance.
All right, well, great. And I apologize, there are a couple, Amy and Richard just joined in, and we're just finishing. We started at 3 Central Time, but this has been recorded. And that on the chat, it's got the email microstretching@gmail.com. So you can email any questions about stretches or order for a certain type of injury, things like that. And then next week, he can address those. And we'll be 3 p.m. Central on each of those. And Jim sent out a suggestion on a Logitech camera, a USB webcam that you can maybe get there, Nikos. Anyway, so hopefully then you can have a little prep going into next week. You all can also look at the articles and see the types of things. And Nikos, maybe if you have diagrams of all of them, I can put that on that drive during the week now. So when they come next week, all of the diagrams of those are on there.
Sure. Yeah. So and I also want to say that, I mean, this is fun. And by all means, critique me as well. It's, you know, say things that is going to help me bring out, because every time I've given lectures in the past, I've often said to people, pick my brains, because there's things in here that as soon as you say something, boom, there's a synapse. Okay?
All right. Well,
Armin, talk to you later, guys.
All right. We'll see you
Yeah,
next
Joy.
week. And I'll put this recording up in that drive as well. It takes about 30 minutes.
And then I'll give you the PowerPoint to this PowerPoint, Richie, so you can upload it. And let's just create a file. Let's just create fun and spread the word, and let's go for it.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Okay,
Cheers.
thanks.
Catch you next week.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys. That's excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye now. See ya.